one of the ladies asked her a very simple question. Is there anything that the Biden administration has done that you would have not done? And she goes, I can't think of anything. That was the end. That lost the election for Kamala Harris.
What was it that lost the election for Kamala Harris? And what kind of advice does Bill O'Reilly have for Donald Trump now that he's won? Let's check it out.
I'm joined now by the journalist and host of No Spin News, Bill O'Reilly. Bill, what an incredible night. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that the American people voted their pocketbooks, and working class Americans are suffering, and that Joe Biden really lost the election. Kamala Harris was not a good nominee or a campaigner, but Biden lost it. Disastrous president. And ironically, for those who don't watch The View in Great Britain or around the world that are watching tonight, ABC News is a program every day called The View. And there are 5 ladies on the program, all of whom are leftists, and they hate Trump. And they invited Kamala Harris on, and that was one of the few venues she agreed to enter. And in the process of telling the vice president how terrific she was, one of the ladies asked her a very simple question. Is there anything that the Biden administration has done that you would have not done? And she goes, I can't think of anything. That was the end. That lost the election for Kamala Harris. When Americans are paying 20% more for the essentials of life, and that includes insurance, food, fuel, clothing, on and on. And when we are embarrassed in front of the world in Afghanistan, and you can't think of one thing that you would have done differently than President Biden, you can't come back from that. And that's where she lost the election.
And Bill,
And he didn't even mention the open borders and all of the resources going to flying illegals into the country, facilitating their stay in our country in 5-star hotels, giving them funded debit cards, paying for them and their children's health care, all of these things, while young people in America are struggling to become homeowners, start a family, all of these types of things, because just the simple basics of living cost way too much. And inflation has outpaced the pay raises that they're getting at work.
And I know Donald Trump for 35 years. I know him better than anybody, I think, except his immediate family. And Trump is a deal maker. He's not a politician per se. He's not an ideologue. He makes deals. And in his first 4 years, the deals he made were good. And real wages went up more than 7%. And that is the truth. And every working American benefited from that. So then 4 years later, despite all of the controversy that Trump had, that was in their minds. Under Trump, it was better for me and my family. And that's why he won.
what's your advice to Donald Trump? I spoke to him this morning. He was tired. I mean, it must be utterly exhausting, and he's nearly 80. He was tired, but he was really euphoric about what looks like a sort of historic scale of the victory, where he may have a clean sweep of literally everything. But what advice would you give someone who's got that kind of mandate from the American people, and who's managed to bring in now Black Americans, Latinos, and Arabs, and so on, as he referenced in his speech last night? What advice do you give him to hit the ground running and to try and unify what is a very fractured United States of America?
All Americans are pretty much the same in the marketplace, despite what you hear. And that's why certain groups that usually vote Democrat went over to the Republican side, because they know their opportunity is much less now than it was 4 years ago. Now, if you give Donald Trump advice, the odds are he will do the exact opposite. So I have to, when he calls me, I have to tell him what I don't want to happen. So he might do what I do want to happen. But I'm not an advice giver. Now, once in a while, the president will call me, sometimes at 2 in the morning, and he'll ask me a question. I'll answer him honestly, just as I answered Barack Obama's questions and Bush the Younger's questions. That's my job as a loyal American. I would say to Donald Trump that on the first day in office, you sign an executive order knocking out all of the regulations that Biden put on the fossil fuel industry. Immediately, that will lead to a price drop of fuel in America, which has to translate into all the other areas except insurance. Trump's going to have to deal with the insurance companies because they're gouging now. People can't even afford to drive a car anymore here. It's insane. But that's number one. And number two is he's going to have to stop all visas for at least 3 months of foreign nationals coming here saying they want asylum. No asylum claims for 3 months until you reorganize this whole thing at the southern border. If he does those 2 executive orders, he'll get at least 6 months of a honeymoon, and his enemies are melting down now. I mean, there are people in the streets it's like the night of the living dead in California. They're just walking around going, brains. And they're just so stunned because the mainstream media was telling them that Kamala Harris was going to win. I knew she wasn't. I predicted she wasn't because I know the folks. That separates me from the New York Times, Washington Post, and all the networks. I know the folks.
What should the Democrats do, Bill? I mean, they've obviously dug themselves into a terrible hole here. I liked Trump's line last night about him representing the core of common sense. And it seems to me what the Democrats have done, they've gone so far progressive left with this woke mindset, the woke virus, as Elon Musk calls it, that they've lost all track of common sense. And one of the main examples I constantly give is this issue of trans athletes in women's sport, where, you know, even the United Nations last week said that 900 medals had been deprived from women athletes around the world in competition by trans athletes. Clearly, that is wrong, unfair, unequal, and the opposite of what the Democrats claim to want for women. So it seemed to me they lost their common sense marbles. How do they get those back, and who do they do it with? Who is the person out there, do you think, in the Democrat political landscape who could bring them back to a more centrist, electable mindset?
Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania will be a very strong contender for the presidential nomination on the Democratic side 4 years from now. Probably get it. Newsom is far too left. Kamala Harris was the furthest left presidential candidate in the history of the United States by far. By far. No one had ever approached her. And the reason that happened was because of the money. George Soros money, I call it dark money, from the progressive left that wants to take over the U.S. government. And if you want to know what they want, you listen to Bernie Sanders, the senator from Vermont who was just reelected last night. The progressive movement wants a strong central government to run pretty much everything. And they want woke policies like, if you want to transition, then O'Reilly's tax dollars will pay for that. If you want an abortion 2 weeks before birth, that's not a problem, and O'Reilly's tax dollars will pay for that. It's so far out there against American tradition that the Democratic Party has destroyed itself. So they'll have to come back to a guy like Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, who, if Harris put him on the second, other than that bumbling guy Walz, who was a total ridiculous disaster for her, and why she didn't put him on the second, Shapiro, because that would have meant Pennsylvania would have gone over to Harris, was she's too insecure. She wants anybody smarter than her on the second. And the final thing I want to tell everybody is that Kamala Harris is a terrible candidate. You can't, in this country, avoid all questions. On Fox News, my alma mater, Bret Baier asked her 10 questions in the 22 minutes he had. She did not answer one of them.
No.
Even the dumbest American, even the dimmest person picked up on that. And they didn't trust her, and she lost.
Yeah. You know, I was told on Josh Shapiro that he turned her down. I don't know whether that's true, but I was told on good authority that it's not true?
No. He would have taken it.
Because I was going to say, if he was offered it and turned it down, that shows just how smart he is.
No, the Soros money didn't want him because of Israel and Gaza, because he's a Jewish American who supports Israel. And they didn't like him anyway because he wasn't a progressive nut like Walz is in Minnesota. And the progressives have the money. They have the Hollywood people. They have the organization, vicious, beyond vicious. All right? This country's never seen smear merchants like the progressive movement. I mean, it is just stunning how vitriolic and deceptive they are. But they're over now, at least in the short term. That whole movement is down the drain.
Yeah, it really is. And I actually thought that talking a run.
Couple things right there. I think that Bill O'Reilly's suggestions to Donald Trump, first of all, to freeze the visas for 3 months, I think that maybe 3 months should be the minimum, just because we have such an issue, and the longer you freeze them, the more time it gives the current people on staff down there at the Border Patrol and everybody that's facilitating these asylum claims to clear them up and make sure the backlog is taken care of. So I think that 3 months should be the minimum. But then the other thing that he said about freeing up the oil, drill baby drill. Let's get America back to the place that we were at, where we were exporting energy and costs were low to heat or cool your house depending on the season, right? And gas was cheaper at the pumps. Simply said, just how Bill O'Reilly worded it, when gas is cheap, items become cheap because shipping costs drop, right? And if they don't, then we'll need to take the next step and start going after these stores and, places that are basically operating on lower shipping costs, but not lowering their prices. You know what I mean? That'll expose a lot of these companies, and then we'll have to start, adjusting the places we shop from. But I wanted to mention, Thomas Massey posted this on X yesterday, and I'm not going to put it on the screen, but I'll read it. The new Congress begins on January 3rd, but President Trump doesn't take office until January 20th. With majorities in the House and Senate, we should have at least a dozen bills to shrink government overreach on his desk awaiting his signature by the first day of his term. And so, not only can Donald Trump do these two things that Bill O'Reilly suggested, he can also potentially have at least a dozen things sitting there on his desk that with the swipe of a pen be able to improve, the majority of things here that the House and Senate bring, which makes the future look even brighter. And it's already starting to look good with some of these folks that Donald Trump has appointed into their positions, or, well, he's not appointed them yet because he's not president, but announced that we'll be leading the guy that's going to lead the border. And as it relates to the conversation Bill O'Reilly and Piers Morgan had about who the potential 2028 candidate could be, and Bill O'Reilly said that it should be Josh Shapiro potentially, that he seems to be the best candidate for the Democratic Party. I don't think the Democratic Party actually agrees, or at least at this stage in time, right? I think that they're actually going to try to run Kamala Harris out there again, which is crazy considering she's already flip-flopped on so many positions. And I just wonder if she'll be able to maintain her current positions over the next 4 years and still maintain favor in the Democratic Party, or if she'll have to switch back to her original positions, or will she just, fade away and fall from politics completely, all yet to be seen. But in my opinion, a person like Kamala Harris doesn't have any position in our government going forward. She obviously is not very qualified, and she is not a leader that I would trust to follow, and I think you guys agree with that. And if you do, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. This is an America First channel, and I do my best to put Americans first, all Americans. And so if you agree with that, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, share this video. That's what helps a lot. And also, I want to let you guys know the Jar Openers podcast, which I'm the host of, will be moving to Wednesdays. Not moving, expanding to Wednesdays. The show on Saturdays will still be there. So come join me live Wednesday at 6 p.m. every Wednesday and Saturday. Currently at 8 p.m., but we might be moving that to 6 just so the times align. But anyways, if I don't see you guys there, hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video.